Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Romali here with the Hurricane Season 2020 update, part of the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for July 29th, 2020, recorded around 11:12 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, taking a look here, we are still dealing with Potential Tropical Cyclone 9, and this is going to be the main focus of this video, is Potential Tropical Cyclone 9, located right now in the Eastern Caribbean, and this is expected to gradually organize over the next few days or so as this gradually begins to shift off towards the north and west here. However, there's a lot of caveats to that, which we'll talk about here in a second. Tropical storm warnings remain in effect for portions of the northern Lesser Antilles because this is a very large wind field, and as such, this is bringing effects to a very wide area. Tropical storm warnings for Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic to near the Haiti border, and tropical storm watches to the south, and these could be upgraded to tropical storm warnings today or tonight. Eventually expected to cross over Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti, moving generally towards the northwest, eventually emerging near or just over Cuba, where we do have tropical storm watches and warnings for the Turks and Caicos and the Central Bahamas, eventually moving close to Key West and eventually up the West Florida coast here. This track is very uncertain, and we'll get to why here in just a minute. You notice the intensity right now, 45 miles per hour, pressure about 1,005 to 1,006 millibars. Expected to gradually organize here over the next 12 to 24 hours or so before beginning to undergo a weakening trend due to land threats, which will be discussed here in a moment. If you take a look here at the wider perspective right now, the visible satellite, and we'll just stop this to a frame, there we go. We'll just kind of keep looping this, and you notice what's going on here is we have a very disorganized broad center. And what's been going on, if we stop the frame here, you notice that we're getting some more banding effects going on. We've got some of this banding-like structure beginning to take place on the far north and eastern side, and this is pretty close to where the new National Hurricane Center position lies as of the 11 o'clock advisory, which is roughly in through here. That also co-locates with a banding feature that's developing off towards its north and west. And this plays a very significant role because where the center actually forms is going to be very significant here. And what's really going on here is we have a larger circulation, this larger envelope and a wave axis that's become more vertically tilted today during the overnight hours into today. And that's allowing for some structural changes to occur. You notice that it's not a tilted over structure like that. It's more of a tilted upright structure, but that still causes problems because you notice that we have potentially two circulation centers. First of all, we could have a circulation center to the south and west indicated by some of these scatterometer passes that indicated winds that were actually closing in here and could indicate somewhat of a mid-level to almost low-level center in here, but not a closed-off center. And then, which we haven't had recon actually sample this area, which is interesting, needless to say, why they didn't, but that is not up to recon. That's more the National Hurricane Center and what they want recon to find. And then we have a potential new center trying to form to the north under some of this deeper convection, which is what we just talked about right over in this area. And that seems to make the most sense. But again, this is a very large, broad envelope of circulation, and it's still not necessarily consolidating. If we take a look here at the recon plane, they actually went back and landed over here in St. Croix. But if you take a look here at the latest recon pass, you notice how we had a lot more of an established trough axis. You notice that these winds were shifting pretty good throughout here, indicating that there might be somewhat of a broad center. But then as they kind of turned off onto the other leg of their flight, you notice those winds did not shift to the north, and and that is indicative that we did not have a closed low-level center in this area. They moved through here and found another really interesting set of circumstances, and we'll kind of zoom in here. You notice how abruptly this wind begins to shift off towards the south and east, or yeah, about south and east, and then abruptly turns to more of that kind of northeast flow. So kind of indicative that we have something trying to get going in this area, which is what is in line with some of the other thinking here. And if we take a look here at the Barbados Radar and the composite loop, we'll just kind of stop this, and we'll just kind of go ahead and move all the way to the end there. But there's really not a lot that we can definitively see. It's a very oblong shaped area over near the islands, and you can't really back this out any further, which is a little troubling, I guess. But you notice that we're not really seeing a lot in this general vicinity, and even out here, you know, you're not really seeing a lot. But what you could be seeing, and if we just kind of put this onto the radar loop, you might be starting to see somewhat of a circulation trying to develop. If we can just slow that down a tad bit, you can see that we have this circular spiraling band almost to the north and east. But that's very uncertain, and that's all this convection that's over here. That's very uncertain as to what we actually have. Now, the latest convective blowup is a little bit telling, because that does show that this convection is trying to rotate around, and this general area could be somewhere with a broad oblong center, but it's very hard to determine where that axis really is and lies. And that's very significant, because where the overall center actually forms, somewhere in here, is going to be rather significant for the very uncertain future of potential tropical cyclone 9. The latest spaghetti models coming from tropicaltidbits.com, the latest computer guidance, continues to suggest that we are going to have a wide spread here. And even out to 24 hours, this is not a very confident spread. You know, it's obviously a lot tighter than here, and that's, you know, over 200 miles of a spread. But, you know, in relative terms, a 24-hour forecast should be relatively compact, and we're not seeing that. And where exactly this goes is going to have a big impact on the intensity and track of the of the cycle or of the storm as it begins to lift off towards the northwest. Again, the general thinking is that this passes over Hispaniola in the Dominican Republic, Haiti, basically Hispaniola as a whole. Eventually, depending on where the center forms, this might be able to scoot just to the north of Cuba, but that's even now starting to be uncertain. And if this continues to track further to the west, we might see a track completely over land. This is a very big system. It's not like Gonzalo, where any land interaction would just immediately kill the cyclone off. But you have to imagine land is not a tropical system's best friend here. And you're starting to get into very uncertain, environmental conditions once you get beyond here, which we'll take a look at here in a minute. But again, its main challenge is going to come in the next 24 hours of, do we happen to get a surprise center reformation further to the north that suggests that it completely avoids land interaction with the Dominican Republic? Does this go completely over the island and then re-emerge out here into somewhat more favorable conditions? Does it take a further south track and have a little bit more time over water, but then ultimately getting stuck over land for a longer time? Or does this not develop at all and keep just tracking further to the west, which we're not really seeing in the models? But these models are continuously trending further to the west, especially out here at the 72 and 96-hour forecast, whereas a couple of days ago, this was almost all over Florida and the Florida East Coast. Now it's over the Florida West Coast and the Gulf of Mexico. And this is a rather interesting thing, and this is from last night. I posted this on a Twitter last night, but it's still relevant to today. And last night we had this broad area of cyclonic turning in the atmosphere with our general low situated out here. And this was, you know, kind of our fixed position at the National Hurricane Center's about 5 o'clock advisory as of yesterday. This eventually kind of relocated over here to the north of Barbados, something like that. And this is the area where we're watching today, the general area of consolidation within about 100 miles of this area, basically, is where we could see general consolidation. And I did make a note here where Potential Tropical Cyclone 9 ends up consolidating is going to be very crucial for the intensity and the long-term track of Potential Tropical Cyclone 9. And to further that here, this is taking a look here at, again, this is all from yesterday and last night, but it's still valid as of today. And each L here that I kind of denoted is a reasonable position for Potential Tropical Cyclone 9. And again, this is kind of the general area where we're thinking land interaction is going to be at its highest over Hispaniola as a whole. But you notice there's a wide range of possibilities from over the island completely to just north of the island or right immediately along the coast. So there's a couple of different positions that this thing could be at within the next 24 to 36 hours. And again, another note that if Potential Tropical Cyclone, if whatever core is of PTC-9, its land interaction with the Dominican Republic and Hispaniola as a whole could make this a weaker system and less susceptible to further strengthening out in this region because it's significantly degraded by the land interaction. However, if we get a track forecast that is just a tad bit, or a track rather, that is just a bit off the coast here or completely in the water, and if it does not make land interaction, it implies that the storm has a stronger chance of, or a better chance at short-term strengthening. And again, where this ends up is going to be rather uncertain, and there's a lot of uncertainties going into that because we still do not even have a closed center of circulation. Although, as I did point out earlier, we are starting to get some better consensus. We'll have to wait on another recon pass later this afternoon or evening to really confirm that, but it does seem like we might be trying to get something on the northern end of this line. Again, that has implications, as all things do. But even if this storm does take a best case in terms of it does move north of Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic and everything like that, let's just say it does manage to avoid land, which is looking less and less likely, there's yet another potential limiting factor involved with PTC-9. What's going on here, again, this was relevant, this is still relevant, this is last night, but still relevant as of today. Our latest thinking really hasn't changed much. A trough and shortwave energy piece is expected to kind of dive down for the continental United States, and that's going to set up this area right here ahead of where the trough is. Again, our trough axis is not actually here, but our energy piece is kind of streamed throughout Florida, and what that's going to do is ahead of that, that's causing a potential vorticity streamer to get kind of ahead of this area. And what that's going to do is I pointed to in the red arrows that if, and a big if, PTC-9 is able to stay north of the Dominican Republic, which is kind of indicated by the red L, that it could become a tad stronger, but yet another challenge awaits. A trough of low pressure is expected to begin moving from the continental United States and moving southward, and it's going to be causing shear ahead of it, which is these red arrows right here. And if PTC-9 moves to the northwest or northwest, as a stronger storm would tend to do, it would encounter some of that southwestern shear and also help to push some dry air into whatever core is there. So this is kind of shown by that white area that if the storm moves into this white area, it's now going to encounter less favorable conditions out here as there's going to be some strong southwesterly shear, not necessarily strong, maybe 10 to 15 knots of a southwestern shear, but you have to imagine a weaker storm in through here. If it is maybe, let's just say 1,003 millibars or so, that's still a very weak system. That's not a robust system as a low to mid-grade tropical storm or hurricane would be. And again, if this continues to move on that forecast path and on that trajectory, now you're starting to get some southwestern shear being impinged on the system, and all of this drier air that it's also going to pull up, and that's part of the potential vorticity streamer is going to be kind of pushing against this system and not really allowing it to develop. Conversely, if this is a stronger system by this time and it does have a better outflow channel, it might be able to push off some of this, the southwestern shear a little bit better and help to ventilate the storm a little bit more, which would help to fight off some of that shear, pushing that dry air and kind of decoupling from the mid-level center. So that's very important because these short-term trends now have and make all the difference in the world in terms of who gets impacted, how strong it will be, and where it ends up, 72 to 96 and eventually 120 hours from now. That's the very big question, and the models have done not so hot of a job on picking out where this is going to occur, and we still have a lot of model discrepancy. And again, I noted it here in all caps, this is going to change, so stay tuned because things can change quickly in the tropics, and as they tend to do. So taking a look here, after we kind of went over all the synoptic scale things, let's take a look here at the model forecast. Again, these models, they're guidance, not gospel, and that's one of the things that we want to point out here. But let's go ahead and dive into the models now. So what's the GFS showing? This is the 06Z run for valid as of 1 a.m. for 7 a.m. this morning, so a couple of hours ago. A couple of things to note here. These reds and darker reds are your higher pressures, and your greens and yellows are lower pressures. So where our system is now, we kind of run that forward to about 2 o'clock this afternoon. Our system is barely showing up here, and the pressures from recon were only about 1,006 millibars. So again, this is barely even showing up in the model fields, but you notice a very strong piece of our energy right now, again, not really allowing this strong ridge of high pressure is not really allowing this to gain significant latitude. And the 6Z GFS eventually takes us within the next 36 hours right over the Dominican Republic, and this is going to impact Hispaniola as a whole. There's no way getting around this system as large as large as it is. This is going to impact Hispaniola as a whole. So people are reminded that while the exact core track matters, this whole area is going to be impacted by heavy rain, gusty winds, certainly in any of the squalls that do come through. So that's very important to understand. This is not a small system like Gonzalo. This is producing tropical storm force winds out over 250 miles generally to the northeast of the system. It's not a tropical cyclone yet, but it's a potential tropical cyclone for the fact that it is likely to get a designation as a true and tried tropical storm later this afternoon or evening, and we're starting to see the signs of that. But regardless, again, this ridge of high pressure is kind of keeping our system in check and far to the south, and over the next few days, we move out here to the hour 84 time frame. This is now approaching the Bahamas and off of the Florida coastline. But you notice our system has a barely closed isobar in through here, and that's very representative that this is not really looking so much of a hot shot anymore that the models are picking up on. First of all, we have a very strong ridge axis over here that's kind of nosing in. Also with our trough of low pressure now beginning to dig in, and that's the same trough that's going to set up this PV streamer out to the north and east and also cause some of that southwestern shear, and that's going to be very important. You notice, I mean, that the models are not so enthusiastic. The GFS completely kills it really after 84, so there's nothing to even see on the 120-hour forecast because the GFS kills it. So again, there's a lot of discrepancy. The Euro is much along with the same thing. It basically takes it a little bit to the south here, avoiding most of Hispaniola, at least what center, in air quotes, is there. But you notice this very strong ridge of high pressure nosing all the way in, forcing this with nowhere else to go south into the Caribbean, eventually moves up here and into the mountains, the mountainous areas of Cuba, and eventually killing it out as well. There's a lot of significant uncertainty here, and I want to put significant emphasis on where the exact center makes landfall is going to mean all the difference for, you know, where the exact center forms and ends up going is going to make all the difference in the world in terms of the eventual track and intensity. Again, we've seen systems in the past surprise us. I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of a surprise here with this, you know, stronger or weaker. Again, this is very hard, and I want people to understand that this cone encompasses almost half of the Gulf of Mexico and then all of the Florida Peninsula and into the Atlantic side. This is a rather, again, the average track error out here to about 5 days is almost 200 nautical miles. This is way more than 200 nautical miles because we have a lot of great uncertainty. The initial short-term track is still very uncertain as well. We don't even know where this is going in the next 48 hours because we don't have a true closed low-level center. So if you live, especially right now, the main impacts throughout the next day or two is going to be directly to the Lesser Antilles still, obviously Puerto Rico, Hispaniola as a whole will be impacted, and then eventually into portions of Cuba and the Bahamas. Where this ends up and how strong it ends up days 3, 4, and 5, I'm not going to even try to speculate beyond them because we don't even know the short-term track of this system beyond the next 2 days. So anybody who, you know, shows one particular model run and says, oh my God, major hurricane, not correct, because it's not going to happen. So we want everyone to understand that we're about no hype here, and we don't want to hype anything up. So please take into consideration, if you live down in those areas, obviously, you need to take this seriously. If you live in the forecast cone, all the way from Cuba to Florida to the Bahamas, you know, even the Florida Panhandle, you need to be monitoring the progress of this system. Everybody in a hurricane-prone region, it's hurricane season. You need to be watching and monitoring and preparing regardless, all right? That's what I'm going to say about that. But we are already here. Again, you know, we have, you know, our unmanned camera systems that, you know, we've been kind of working on over the past couple of months. Those are ready. Now we're just kind of waiting on to see if it's going to be practical for us to actually start, you know, deploying them, because obviously, you know, this is starting to get, you know, relatively close within time, so we will have to kind of just wait and see. But again, you know, expect this track forecast and intensity forecast to change very significantly over the next couple of days or so, because this is not set in stone. All right. With that being said, I will be back here later this afternoon with another video forecast update, probably roughly around 3 p.m. Eastern time-ish or so. And then we will go over some of the afternoon runs and talk about the 2 p.m. intermittent advisory from the Hurricane Center, and go over, I believe we have another reconnaissance aircraft that will be scheduled for around that time, so we'll go over what they find then. All right. With that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your morning and early afternoon. I am Michael Romali, and I will see you guys back here then later this afternoon. Stay safe, everyone, and I will see you later.